Great that you're all here. What a great crowd. Thanks for all being here this morning for this adult forum. We have withheld donuts from you. And I'm so glad. I know that the coffee servers were concerned that there might be mutiny, so thank you for not rebelling yet. Dr. Mike plans. I think he will release them at some point, but we'll see. We are fortunate in this community and in this congregation to have a variety of people with a variety of incredible skills and gifts, and and people who want to share those with this congregation. And Dr. Jensen emailed and said, I'm working on some stuff and I'd really like to share it with the forum, and so we're always grateful for that. And so he's here, expert in nutrition, and is doing some research along with a student, and so would like to share that with you and hopefully have some participation in some of the work that they're up to today. Let's welcome Dr. Mike Jensen.
Thanks, everybody. I apologize for the delay in the donut. But part of this is there's things about food that we do that make us eat more. And so this is a little experiment that I'd like you to try before you get your donut. And think about how hungry you are right now. And write it on your paper, if you've got a piece of paper there, record it on your smartphone on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being you're so hungry you would eat raw meat, and 0 being I'm so full I couldn't eat another bite. And just think about that right now for a minute, and write down on your paper or record someplace if you want to about how hungry you are. I'll give you a couple seconds to do that, so the people with the donuts have time to put them out for you. So now that you've kind of thought about how hungry you are, now please feel free to go back and get some donuts, but don't eat it immediately, because we're going to do a little experiment and have you take just 1 or 2 bites. So if you could, feel free to go get your donuts right now. There they are. So the other thing I wanted to share with you is that as physicians and dietitians, we try to teach our patients about nutrition, and a lot of my patients come to me and they'd like to know, how do I get my weight down? And so I send them to some of our very good dietitians, and the dietitians teach them this, or they go to classes. But it turns out that we actually don't know whether, when we try to share with our patients this information about food, whether they actually get the concepts when they're done. And I have had many of my patients say, oh, don't send me to a dietitian, I already know all that stuff. I'm sure nobody here's ever said that. So Dahlia and I decided we would try to develop sort of a survey to see how much people really know about how food and the properties of food affect how much they're going to eat. And as part of that, we like to find out how much people who don't work at Mayo, and I know a lot of you do work at Mayo, but how much people really know about nutrition. And so that's why Dahlia has a bunch of surveys back there, a bunch of surveys in the back with pens. So if you are willing to fill out the survey for us, it'll kind of give us information about how the community as a whole how much they know about nutrition. And that in turn will help us hopefully do a better job of our teaching when we have patients who come to us to ask for information. So the survey takes about 20 minutes to complete, if you're willing to do it. Now, who went back and got a donut? Okay, a lot of people. Now, if you've had a bite or two, if you could write down on the paper now how hungry you are, and compare that to how hungry you were before you took that first 1 or 2 bites of your pastry. Okay, who is more full now than they were before they took that first 1 or 2 bites? Lester, yeah, the only one. Who's a little more hungry now than they were when they took their first bite? So it turns out that when most of us get, if we're a bit hungry and we get something that tastes good, we're actually get hungrier. So if you started off as a 5 hungry, many people will notice that after they have a first few bites of a really tasty food, that if they think about it, they're actually hungrier than they were before they had that first few bites. On the other hand, if you got a really bland pastry back there that didn't have any glaze on it and it was just kind of a cake without much sugar, what you might find is that you immediately start getting full. It turns out that if we keep eating, we tend to get full at about the same rate, but if you start out hungrier, it takes more before you finally decide it's time to stop. If we just put out really blah pastries back there that had little flavor, what would happen is if you were pretty full to start with, you'd be full really quickly. And it's interesting that it turns out that the good foods fill us up as good tasting foods fill us up about as quickly as bland foods, except that when you first eat that good food, you're hungrier. So it takes more before you stop eating. And so that's one of the things I wanted to share with you as think about in your daily life as you go to take those first bites of food. Are you hungrier or are you more satisfied? Naturally, we would think we'd be more satisfied and that we would stop eating. But that's one of the, I guess, good sides, bad sides about really tasty food is that it actually makes you want to eat more of it as you start. Now, when my patients talk to me and they say, well, that's great, but how does that help me? Because I really don't want to eat bland food all day, every day. I was going to start the Purina People Chow company that would be very nutritious food, but would be pretty bland, and I figured I'd go broke pretty quickly. So. But actually, most of the successful diets where people have to eat the same thing time after time, if it's a bland food, that's one of the ways that these diets work. And if you think about some of the drinks that people used to drink to help them lose weight, they weren't all that tasty. And so people got full very quickly from those. So that's one of the things I wanted to share with you. And I didn't bring any slides, right? I don't have a PowerPoint presentation for you, which I know is kind of surprising. My wife says I can't even talk to her without doing a PowerPoint presentation. But I thought what might be better would be to give you some examples of food and then ask you guys what you think about this. So probably most everybody here has been told about regular soft drinks and how they may not be so good for you. And so Dahlia was kind enough to go out and get us a regular Dr. Pepper here, which, you know, I would tell most of my patients, don't drink the regular soft drink. This has a lot of 150 calories for this little teeny bottle, which for most people would take them about an hour of walking to burn off, if you're a slow walker. Now this is obviously a lot better, right? So this is orange juice. And when I tell my patients that maybe they should lay off of the soft drinks, and I have had some of my patients who would drink like 4 to 6 soft drinks a day of regular hot, they go back and they say, well, Dr. Jensen told me don't drink the soft drinks anymore. So they might grab something like this, a good healthy Tropicana. Gosh, 150 calories. But because it's orange juice, it's healthy, right? But it's okay if you're vitamin C deficient, and you know, you've got scurvy, this would be a really good choice. But most of us are protected from that. So they go out and grab this, and they have 4 to 6 of these, and it's the exact same effect on their weight. Now, this is a diet Dr. Pepper, which some diet soft drinks have kind of gotten a bad rap in some places. Have you guys heard any negative things about diet soft drinks? Like they make you hungrier, or they drive your appetite, or they cause cancer, or something like that. But it turns out that this has 0 calories, that when people replace a diet soft drink for a regular soft drink, they actually lose weight. And they lose as much or more weight than if they changed it to sparkling water. So it isn't all bad about diet soft drinks. Some people have legitimate concerns about the types of artificial sweeteners that are in there. But if you're trying to manage your weight, you're much better off with your diet soft drink or your sparkling water than you are with your Dr. Pepper or your orange juice. Not to say orange juice is bad, but it does have calories. And people will tend to consume more of this than they would an equivalent amount of oranges. So you might have to eat 2 or 3 oranges to get this much juice. And think about how full you'd be after 2 or 3 oranges.
Dr. Jensen,
Yeah.
I know a guy who drank 6 12-ounce bottles of regular Pepsi every day. I convinced him to switch to diet. He didn't. What's going on there?
So the question is, we all know people who used to drink a lot of soft drinks and switch to a diet soft drink, and they don't lose any weight. And so, in general, that is not everybody, but in general, the tendency would be for people to lose weight. Now, some people are so geared into consuming that amount of calories that switching out, they just replace it with something else. So it's possible, I don't know, but it's possible that not only did he have diet soft drink, but he might have had some orange juice or something to replace it. But the tricky thing about our sugar-sweetened beverages is that they fool your appetite. In other words, if you were going to eat your burger and fries and you had one of these with it, you wouldn't actually eat 150 calories less of your burger and fries. It's because it completely fools your appetite system. So these kind of beverages don't provide the same kind of feedback to our appetite that, say, your burger does, or your pizza, or your vegetables. They sort of trick you into consuming more of them because we don't get the same kind of full signal that we get. And we don't really understand why that is right now. Why is it that the juice here doesn't make you full, but the orange would? It may have to do with some of the non-digestible parts of oranges that provide some of that fullness. So one of the things I wanted to share with everybody is that if you are looking for a way to relatively painlessly, cut back on calories, it's okay to go with a diet soft drink. On average, and there are always exceptions to every rule, but on average, you're probably going to be easier to manage your weight switching to calorie-free beverages. And fortunately, they make some pretty tasty ones. Like now, you don't just have to drink plain water. So that was the first two things I wanted to go over. One is what makes us hungrier, tasty foods do, and what doesn't make us full, and that's sugar-sweetened beverages. Okay. I've got 3 sizes of Lay's potato chips, right? They're exactly the same potato chip in each one. Like one of these isn't a diet potato chip or but if you're getting a meal and somebody puts this in front of you and you would eat, say, maybe 3/4 of it, right? Some people like me might eat the whole thing. But if you would eat 3/4 of this and we put this in front of you, you'd probably eat about 3/4 of it. And if you're sitting in front of the TV watching the Super Bowl, and this is sitting by you, you might eat 3/4 of this. So what does this mean? It's not just for potato chips. It's for almost any food that we get. The bigger the portion size, the more we eat. Even if we would have been satisfied with a smaller portion and gone away completely full, put a bigger portion, you're going to eat more. That's why, a lot of us in the nutrition community were particularly upset about this supersized thing that some of the fast food restaurants do. If I've made anybody here hungry, I'm gonna let you guys have some potato chips since I kind of made you wait too long for your rolls. Yes, sir.
Mayo, all the vending machines have 16-ounce bottles of pop, not 12-ounce cans. There are no cans except in the river ones. Why do we have extra size servings throughout the entire?
Right, Mayo gets a profit from those vending machines, and it turns out that there's some very hard calculations that go into how much will people pay for a certain thing, and they know kind of exactly how much we'll pay for what size and what the profit is going to be. Those of us in the nutrition community argued against exactly what you just pointed out, as these large portion sizes are the only option. And we were kind of overruled because the decision was that the profit that Mayo can make from offering it that way is more than they could from the smaller portion sizes. So it's marketing. And even, at a healthcare institution where we try to do the best decisions for everybody that works there, it turns out if they can make money on us, they're still going to do it.
Nothing wrong with eating a bag. There's nothing wrong with even
Great question. Just to repeat for those of you who are in the back, the comment was that we noticed that it's about the amount that we take in. So the example was, 3/4 of this bag, might not be so bad, but 3/4 of this bag would obviously be a lot more and would make it a lot harder for us to control our weight. And so how do we help people get a handle on this portion size thing? And the behavioral research that's going on tells us that you can cut from just strictly the portion size, and we'll move on to some other ways we can trick ourselves into eating less. But from the portion size part of it is to have smaller plates. When like if I eat out, there's some places I go where I know they're going to bring me a huge portion. And knowing me, I know I'm probably going to eat the entire thing. And then I'm going to be full, I'm not going to sleep well. So what can you do? If I'm in one of those places, I tell them to bring me half of it and put the other half in a take-home, so I can see it, so it's in a box. And it turns out if you're done with that first half and you wait a little bit, you're usually saying, I guess I don't really want that other, and it's in a box anyway, so I can't see it. So that's one of the ways you can reduce that by adjusting the size. I used to do that for my kids when they were little. I'd put a little bit on it, and my wife is a good cook, so it tasted very, very good. And my son just wolfed his down, and he goes, I want more. I said, okay, well, you can have more, but let's just wait about 5 minutes, and then you can go have more. So I didn't say no. 5 minutes later, he goes, I hate you. He says, now I'm full, and I don't want it anymore. So small portions, and then wait, is a way that you can kind of fool yourself. So we've talked a bit about the sugar-sweetened beverages, and we've talked a bit about portion size. But the other thing another thing I wanted to share with you is that you can fool your appetite in another way. And that's by the quality of the food that you select. So Dahlia was kind enough to get me 2 cans of soup, exactly the same size. And you could make this for lunch. One of them is the creamy chicken noodle soup. You eat a can of this, you're going to be full. The other is the chicken noodle condensed soup. It's not creamy. You eat a can of this, you're going to be full. And you'll probably be almost exactly the same fullness after this. But the creamy one is going to give you 120 calories, and the non-creamy one is 60 calories. So exact same portion size. Tastes pretty close to the same. You're going to be equally full after both, but one of them gives you half the calories. And that's another way that you can fool yourself into consuming fewer calories without having to cut back on your portion size. Look at it the opposite way. Sometimes the people who make these products can fool us into eating more calories and not being any more satisfied with it. So one of the things our dietitians work really hard is to have people think about the quality of the food that they select. And sometimes that involves, unfortunately, learning to do the math on the back of these labels, which are admittedly confusing and kind of small. On the survey that Dahlia had for you all to look at, there were some examples of these, and they made them really big so it was easy to see. But looking on the back of these, even at my age, I'm kind of going, what? So this is another thing that we've learned, is that people tend to eat about the same volume of food each day. And the way I explain it to my students and my residents is, if I were to follow you around with a bucket and put the amount of food that you eat each day in a bucket, that bucket would be roughly equally full each day. So we don't vary hugely the volume of actual food that we eat. But if one day I was eating a lot of vegetables and legumes and beans, I might have 1/3 the calories from the day that I went to Kentucky Fried Chicken for lunch and McDonald's for breakfast and Pizza Hut for supper. Because that volume of food can have 3 to 4 times the number of calories. So we tend to eat for a volume, for a fullness for the most part. And so one of the things our dietitians try to help people understand is, how do I figure out which foods are the lower calories but taste just as good as the higher calories? Because if you can do that, then you've got another leg up on your ability to manage your weight. But what we don't know, and why we're asking you to take part in the survey, is how well have we taught that concept and how well is it understood by the general public in terms of these relationships between the quality of food and how much satisfaction you get out of it in the end. And what we hope is that if we can test whether we do a good job at this in the clinic with our dietitians and our physicians, and if we find out we're not doing a good job, then that puts the onus on us to improve our ability to share information in a way that's understandable to everybody. So that's the purpose of that survey, is to say, how much do you know now? I'm not going to make you take it again after we do this, because I don't want to be graded on how well I touch you about food. So here's the last two things. One of them is, if you think about, you're going out to eat, and let's say you're like me, and you like pizza, and you go to Pizza Hut, or your favorite other thing. But here's the condition. When you order it, you just get what you order. You just get the pizza, or you just get the sandwich, or you just get the spaghetti, or whatever it is. So that's the only thing you get. And think about when that might have happened to you and how much you eat. And now let's contrast that with, you go to a party and 20 people have bought 20 different foods. Or you go to a buffet and they've got 100 different foods at that buffet. And now maybe some of you are really great regulators at this, but the average person is going to eat a lot more when they've got this huge variety of food in front of them than when they sit down even with their favorite food. And so what we've learned is that we get tired of a taste, even if it's our favorite taste. We kind of get tired of it, and then we stop eating. But the other thing we've learned is that we introduce a new taste, and you can get hungry all over again. And that can happen and happen and happen until you're just uncomfortably full. Now, probably nobody here has ever been to a buffet and been uncomfortably full, or a Thanksgiving dinner with 10 different dishes and then been uncomfortably full afterwards, and you wonder, why did I eat so much? It's likely because every time you got a new taste, you just reignite that hunger again, so you could eat more. And so you see that new food and it gets you hungry. And in fact, if you go to a restaurant where the waiters are trained properly and they want you to get dessert, they're not going to bring you a dessert menu. Because if you're full, you're probably not going to order dessert. But if they actually bring examples of the dessert out, bring out those cookies or the cake or whatever, and they roll it by on a tray, a lot of people will now get the dessert. Because there's something about seeing it, smelling it, that reignites that desire to eat. Yes, ma'am?
What do you recommend about consuming liquids with meals? My grandparents never had a drink with their meals. No water, milk, or anything, because they thought it was just better for their digestion. And now that I'm a parent, I notice that kids fill up on liquids, and then they don't eat as much, and then 30 minutes later, they're hungry. So what do you think about liquids?
Okay, good. So the question is, what's the role of liquids in how much we eat, and should you have liquids with your meal or not? Is there some benefit to it? And I would say, for the most part, there are some liquids that will give you a temporary, I don't want to eat anymore. And oftentimes those are like dairy beverages, things like that, that do have protein and some other kinds of things in them that provide that full feeling. But a lot of the other beverages, you can mix with your meal without any problem. And so I think it comes down to personal preference. There have been a lot of different theories about it. Some people say, oh, you should have a lot of water with your food because it's going to fill you up, you'll eat less. And some people say, no, you shouldn't have anything with your meals because it helps you do a better job with it. It turns out that it probably doesn't make a difference, and it comes down to personal preference. So if you like to have a lot of water or beverage, hopefully lower calorie, with your meal, then it's okay to do so. It certainly isn't going to harm your digestive ability or your ability to get nutrition out of the foods. With one exception.
Yeah, so would it be better if I just gave him like a small glass of water and that he would eat more of his meal instead of milk? Because we usually serve milk with the meals.
Yeah, so great, thanks. So the question is, if you're not eating your meals, are you getting full from something you've had beforehand? And in the case of milk, that is true. Some of the studies have shown that you do get some satiety, some satisfaction from milk that will decrease, which is probably different from some of the other things that we talked about, the fruit juices and sugar-sweetened beverages. Yes, sir?
I've been experimenting with breakfast, and I'll have one of two breakfasts lately. One is, either one has 6 ounces of orange juice, so I can have my morning pills, and the other is either, maybe if I turn it off, it'll work. No, let's take it. I'll just speak loudly. So 6 ounces of orange juice either way. The other is 1 hard-boiled egg, or a bowl of cereal with blueberries and 2% milk. If I have the cereal, I'm thinking about lunch by 11. If I have the egg, I'm not even thinking about lunch at noon. But the cereal is probably 4 times the volume.
Great. So for those of you in the back, an example of if you have a carbohydrate-rich breakfast where you're getting cereal and milk for breakfast, people, he noticed that he'd be hungry by 11 o'clock. But if you had a hard-boiled egg, he wouldn't be hungry until noon, or not even at noon. And that's actually one of the tactics that our dietitians use for people who note that mid-morning hunger, is that if you get a protein bolus at a meal that seems to have that full feeling that carries on longer than a pure carbohydrate. Now, there are some exceptions to that. If you had the time to cook steel-cut oats for breakfast in the morning, that, because the fiber is just so much a part of the steel-cut oats, people tend to have that same experience of, oh, I'm not even hungry until noon or afternoon. So part of it is the volume and how long it stays in your stomach, and part of it is the actual protein content, like with the hard-boiled egg, is a huge amount of protein. And some people get a very nice effect of that it keeps them full for a longer period of time than a pure carbohydrate, or a carbohydrate with a little bit of milk in it. So yeah, I've heard that. In fact, I've experienced that myself. Is that you just don't want to be hungry at 10:30 or 11 o'clock in the morning. You got things to do, and so switching the types of things you have for breakfast can be a great tactic for overcoming it.
Test.
Here. Can I have one?
Wait, I'm trying to figure out which channel it is.
Yeah, put a little yogurt with that and it'll be fine. Back to the chips and the snacks. I've heard, take your big bag and divide them into snack-sized portions. And when you finish that little bag, that should do you for a while. Have you heard that? Does that?
Yeah, as long as it's out of sight.
Yeah, no, yeah, you
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. All right.
Very good. So, oh yes, sir.
Kind of to your soup, how come some of it is so high in sodium?
That's a great question. So it turns out that, at least in terms of weight management, sodium doesn't cause a problem, but it does if you've got high blood pressure. You don't want to be getting a lot of sodium. And the question is, so why do some of the soups have so much sodium, but they're lower calorie? It's because of the taste. So one of the ways you can make lower calorie foods taste as good as higher calorie foods is by adding sodium to them. And so I'm sure some of you have accidentally gotten some of the low sodium soups. People don't like them, right? They just don't taste as good. Now, once you get used to it, it's fine, but it takes a while to get used to it. It's like going from whole milk that I grew up on to drinking skim. It's like, oh, you try to do that all at once, it's pretty horrible. And it's the same thing with the sodium content of soups and other things that we take in is that the low sodium ones don't taste as good. So they want to give you something that you'll pay for, that you'll consume. And so by putting extra salt in it, they can reduce the calories and you'll still like it as much as you would a higher calorie soup. So part of that is our responses to the flavors and the sensations, and the low sodium soups sit on the grocery store aisle for a long time compared to the others. So that's a great question. If you don't have high blood pressure, it's probably okay to take in the higher sodium soup. So the last thing, and it kind of gets back to this beverage thing, is I'm sure the dietitians go over this, but what's the calorie content of alcohol? Now, I'm not talking about communion, right? I'm not worried about the wine that you're having at communion. But it turns out that there's this huge variability in the calorie content of alcoholic beverages, from beer to wine to spirits. And two things that happen. One is people tend to not count that in their calculations of how much they're having in a day. So they have their meal and maybe they've done a good job and they read the labels and portion size is too big, but they have a nice beer. And so that beer could be pretty low calorie, it could be really high calorie. Same thing for spirits, same thing. Wines are more even across the spectrum, but they're not free. And in fact, your liver is the only organ that can burn alcohol for calories. And when it does, guess what it stops burning? It stops burning fat. So if you have 100 calories in an alcoholic beverage, the liver says, I gotta get rid of this. But I can't actually spend more calories doing it. I have to do it with the same amount of calories I always do, so I'll just stop burning fat. So then you have that 100 calories of fat that you didn't burn. And guess where that goes? It goes back to the fat cells. Then maybe if you've cut down your portion sizes and you've been careful about the kind of soups you get and you don't have such a wide variety, your fat cells will say, okay, I'll give you back that 100 calories that you could burn off. So those are some of the things that we've learned from research both at Mayo and outside of Mayo. And the sort of core concepts for people who would like to manage their weight is by things you can have control over: portion size, sugar-sweetened beverages, variety of food that you have in front of you, and then the quality of food. Is there a lot of calories per bite, or are there fewer calories per bite? And those are things that we are trying to help. We'd like to know if our patients understand these concepts at the end of the day when they come to us for help. Because if you understand the concepts and then can implement them in your daily life, it makes it much easier to manage things than having to memorize a bunch of individual facts about stuff. So we'd like to know, are the concepts that we hope people get, are they getting it? And we hope that the survey then will give us an idea, if we give it to people before and after we do our education, whether we're being effective as healthcare providers at communicating that information that we think our patients need in order to be successful. So I'd like to open it up for questions. Dick?
Can you say a few words about bedtime snacking?
Bedtime snacking. So probably, if you're not having a weight issue, the worst thing about bedtime snacking is nighttime heartburn. Sometimes people find it more difficult to fall asleep with bedtime snacking. Some people actually, it puts them to sleep. So all things being equal, it's probably not the best thing to be continuing to munch after supper. As one of my patients told me, she was trying to keep track of her calories with a little app on her phone, and she goes, "Oh, I realized after supper that I'd already gotten my 1,800 calories for the day, so I was going to eat more, so I just stopped recording." Because I didn't want it to look bad. So yeah, continuing to eat after supper, whether it's during TV or before you go to bed, is one of those less regulated food intake times, and makes it harder to sleep for some people, and it's definitely harder to manage your weight.
So what drives the need to snack?
Well, this is pure opinion. Okay, so the question is, what drives the need to snack? Let me share some observations. I've had the chance to go a couple of times to Europe and to go out to eat in Europe. And they eat a lot of food for supper. Not more, maybe a little bit more than us, but not a lot more than us. But they take a long time to eat. They sit there and they enjoy it. And then nobody snacks after that. Because my opinion is they're satisfied. They've had an enjoyable meal that they like, and they're satisfied. It's time to move on. In my household, it's a rush to get through the meal so you can get to your next thing. And I have a feeling there's a component of satisfaction that we don't get when we rush through our food, or we eat it while we're watching TV, which unfortunately I've developed a bad habit of doing recently. But I think you're just not as satisfied. And so if you're not satisfied, you need more of something. So I have no data to prove that. This is just my opinion from observations. Is when like if I go out to eat with friends and we have a nice long evening meal, I go home, I don't feel like eating. But if I rush through whatever I made, then I say, oh, no, something sounds good. Pure speculation.
Hi, I like to go out to eat, but so many of the restaurants have very little part of their entree includes fruits or vegetables. Are there types of restaurants that you would recommend that would have more nutritious options, or specific restaurants around?
Let's see, Mayo would probably shoot me if I endorsed any specific restaurant. Actually, what I can probably do, it would be to work with some of our dietitians who keep track of these things on a regular basis and provide some options, types of restaurants that have more things. Clearly the fast food ones are going to be a problem because they're there to move things through, and fruits and vegetables don't move things through. Trying to think of how to eat that much. I can tell you some of the restaurants have really good big salads that mix in healthy stuff with them, and so that, I'm not endorsing, there is a restaurant that happens to have a wide variety of beers that also happens to have a ahi tuna salad that's really good, and it's really filling. And so if you can find a place like that where they've got a dish that you like that's got a lot of vegetables in it, I would stick with it. But I'll see if I can't work with some of our dietitians and see what they recommend in terms of types of restaurants or things where you're more likely to get that kind of, it tastes just as good, it's just as filling, but it has fewer calories.
So my question is, you can understand the calories per gram and all that. I think I do pretty well. The part that I have an issues with is the execution. Right? I mean, how do you really limit yourself to half a cup of yogurt and noodles, right? I mean, who eats a half a cup of noodles, right? Let's begin.
Yeah. So that's the other side of the coin. So when we look at nutrition as it relates to weight management or blood pressure control or anything like that, one of them is, did we relay the information in a way that people now really understand it? And the other side of that is, how do we teach the principles of behavior change? I mean, honestly, I don't have a willpower pill or shot or vaccine. If I did, I'd buy this Mayo Clinic and sell it. But it's, there's another side of trying to understand is how do people implement and make these changes in behavior in a way that's painless? Because you can only do willpower for so long, and then it gets pretty boring. So there's a whole different side of weight management research that is, how do people change behaviors and what are the effective strategies? What Dahlia and I are trying to figure out is, so have we actually taught the correct behaviors? Dahlia always gives the example of that I do is, okay, so I stopped drinking pop, and I changed my behavior. It's to drink orange juice. So people change the behavior, but they changed it to something that wasn't helpful, and then they get frustrated and give up. So the flip side of the research is, okay, now we've taught the nutritional principles, we hope, effectively, and that's what the survey is about. Now we want to test, have we taught people realistic ways to change that behavior? The exact kind of struggle you've had is, who eats a half a cup of this stuff? And so part of it is the nutrition side is, would you rather have a half a cup of the tasty yogurt that's pretty good and you're still a little bit hungry, or would you rather have the full cup of the lower calorie stuff that maybe doesn't taste as good, but you're full? So it's those kind of trade-offs that we struggle with in terms of, are we doing the right thing for the people who come to us for advice? Man.
Can you comment on the problem of, like, it seems like there's a metabolic set point, that a fair number of people, myself included, have been able to diet down to our healthy weight, right? And you just seem to come back up, and I look over, because it has these great records, and if you look at my weight graph, right, there's like 2 points where I got down to my goal weight, and yet the slope of that line has not changed in 30 years.
So the question is there kind of a set point for us? Are we sort of destined to be at a certain weight? And there's two theories of that. One is the theory that once you hit a certain weight, that when you go down, signals kick in that try to drive it back up. Actually, the same thing might be true in the other direction, because we've done some studies where we asked people to overeat for 2 months, And so people would gain, anywhere from 4 to 15 pounds from overeating, and then they would lose it all within a few weeks. So there is some evidence that there's a sort of a set point for us. The other theory, they may not be mutually exclusive, is that there's an environmental set point. So if we were to take you and make you enroll in the military, where you got kind of bland food and you had to work all day long, your set point might be a lot lower because your environment has changed dramatically. And if you're in the military for 20 years, you might find that your average weight in a strenuous job with food that's kind of sometimes not that good might be a lot lower. And so the other theory is that our set point is really our environment. How much activity we get, the types of foods we're exposed to, the type of cues we have that drive us away from our successful, I got my weight down, diet then, because the environment's always there. It's always fighting to make you go back to where you were before. And I think those two things probably work together, the environment and your biology. Yes, ma'am?
What about genetics? Like I come from a family of all small people.
So that's interesting. A lot of times when we think about genetics and your weight, we think about is there a few genes that we inherit that predispose us one direction or another. And the studies that have been done, even if you put together hundreds of variants of genes that seem to relate to weight, they explain a pretty small percentage of the variation within a population. But that said, I think it's probably even more complex than that, because for the most part, if I have a heavy young adult come in to see me for weight management things, for the most part, their parents are heavy. When I have a heavy young adult come in to see me and both parents are skinny, I start wondering what's going on. Because that's just very different. It could be okay, but I think your observation is right. There are heritable tendencies for people to be at a certain weight, but thus far we really haven't found any genes that tell us about that. We're better off just looking at somebody than doing a big gene test.
Mike, thanks for all your helpful comments. My guess is if we didn't have the snow on the ground, this forum might be on the track over at Soldier Field. Can you talk a little bit about your perspectives on some of the other dimensions of weight management, like physical activity, healthy sleep? How can that complement some of the choices, our ability to make the choices that you just talked about with respect to nutrition?
Yeah, so when I talk to my patients about physical activity, I have three things. One is you probably need to be more physically active than you are. Number two is I don't want you running out starting a big program that you're going to get hurt in. I'd rather build up slowly on that. And the third point is the reason is physical activity very seldom by itself gets people to lose weight. I mean, there's occasional exceptions to the guys training for marathons or something like that. But for the most part, people who become more physically active are just more successful at keeping the weight off. So if you've been successful at losing 20, 30 pounds, the people who keep that weight off are the people who intentionally construct their day. So they've got about another hour, hour and a half of physical activity in the form of walking. And they usually do it by making sure they don't have any choice other than to walk. So they set up their day with things built in that they pretty much have to do to get in that physical activity. There's the occasional weird person like me who really likes going to the gym after work and will do my physical activity. But for most everybody else, it's how do I get in these extra steps? And so that I've had patients tell me they have walking meetings. So I actually now have walking meetings myself. So they kind of build in that physical activity, but it's not to get them to lose weight, it's to keep it off. And so if you build it in slowly and comfortably over the course of 6 to 12 months, you're less likely to get injured and you're more likely to find ways that you can keep doing it than if you just rush right out and do this really high intensity thing where you get burned out and you get injured and everything else. So I had people do it slowly. The second question was about sleep. And we do know that people who are sleep deprived tend to have a much more of a struggle in terms of trying to accomplish things that they like to do. So this is where I don't take my own advice. I only get about 7 hours of sleep a night, sometimes less. But we do know that a good amount of healthy sleep probably helps give you a little more resiliency. Yes, sir.
Doctor, I have a question. How about vegetarianism versus my own omnivorousness?
Yeah, vegetarians have a harder time eating enough food to gain a lot of weight because the food that they eat is more calorie dilute than those of us who are omnivores. Like you get the nice, I mean, yeah, you kind of vegetarian cupcakes with icing and stuff on it. That's probably not the best choice, but if you're eating a lot of vegetables, the calories in those are way fewer for the equivalent volume than the others. So we were trying to do a study on overweight vegetarians to see, if it benefited, if their fat was healthier than overweight omnivores. It was very hard to find overweight vegetarians. Most of the ones had just become vegetarian, and that was because they wanted to lose weight. So, yeah, great question.
Mike, thanks for the good talk here. Any comments on the use of, in some of the studies we have now, in fitness trackers and any role for them in activity and weight loss?
Yeah, so, I think in the past we had a really hard time. All of my patients who were struggling with weight walked a lot, 5 miles a day. I would walk so much for my work. I work in the hardware store or whatever, 5-10 miles a day. And then we got the step counters and the fitness trackers that, oh, guess what, you're getting about 4,000 steps a day. And the thing is, we fool ourselves. We fool ourselves into how much activity we're doing and how much food we're eating. We always underestimate how much food we eat, and we overestimate how much physical activity we've done. The nice thing about these fitness trackers is, well, you know exactly how many steps you've got. And I think for patients who really want to do the right thing and they were self-overestimating, these are going to boom. And some people are compulsive and they do it, and it's been very helpful for them. Others will do it for a week or a month or 2 months or 3 months, and then they get tired of it. It's too much trouble. So when people do it, they tend to benefit from it. Last one?
Yes, we talk a lot about the food we eat, the calories, input in general. Would you elaborate or comment on the effect of adding more fiber to our diet to increase the output instead of being absorbed in the body?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in fact, the fiber is one of those things about diluting the calories. So if you have foods with a lot of fiber, it really fills you up with a lot fewer calories and has some other intestinal benefits too along the way. But the fiber is probably one of those things in fruits, vegetables, legumes, stuff like that gives you that really full feeling with a lot fewer calories. So we know fiber does have some ability to fill you up, and it's probably mostly in the stomach because the fiber is one of the last things to leave your stomach. The stomach is running other stuff, and so you feel full longer.
This is just a light note, but years ago when my dad was at the clinic and they put him on a diet, and the doctor said the 2 best exercises were shaking your head from side to side and pushing yourself away from the table.
Yeah, unfortunately, probably harder to do in practice than. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful, and for those of you who were willing to fill out the survey, we really appreciate it. It'll help us know whether this is a good tool to try to understand the things we're teaching. Thank you.
Thank you.